welcome to this week's Technical Steering Committee of the EVerest project. We have some great highlights this month. So OSPP has been accepted as an IEC standard. This was published, I think, only a few days ago during the OCA anniversary event. That was, I think, this Tuesday. It is actually OSPP 2.0.1, and I think this is great news for the industry that this has finally been accepted as an international standard. Second news is that EVerest joins the Task 53. So the Linux Foundation, the EVerest project, and Task 53 is joining forces to allow interoperability testing, especially for bidirectional charging. So everything, including the ISO 15118-20 that we are already working on. Then there was the New York Climate Week, where Voltpost was showcasing their retrofit lamppost charger, which runs EVerest. I think we have another slide about this later on. And then we had the CharIN Testival in Europe and France, with quite some interesting and successful ISO 15118 and also charge and OSPP testing. So as always, we show the antitrust policy note. Read this carefully and comply with it. And we head over to the What's New section. As always, we show you known EVerest-based charges. I'm not sure if there has been an update compared to last month, but you can see the list here. Of course, we don't know every charger that runs EVerest, but if you know, please let us know so we can add it to these slides. The same is true for the supported EVSE controllers and DevKits, where you can see the list here. Also here, if you know additional ones, please reach out and let us know. Well, now the event recap of what has already been shared on the initial slide. So at the New York Climate Week, Voltpost was showcasing the lamppost charging platform. Voltpost is not a TSC member, but like part of the EVerest community, and it's leveraging EVerest on these chargers. Yeah, this is a great example of a community member that showcase their chargers. And I think I already mentioned you can reach out if you know more or yeah, want to share or want to let us share such news if you're a charging station manufacturer as well in one of the upcoming TSCs. The CharIN Testival in France was early this month. We tested ISO 15118-2 and -20. A few people from Pionix have been there, and Pionix was not the only company with an EVerest-based charger there, which is also nice news. -2 and -20 was tested. I heard about successful -20 DC sessions and also successful plug-and-charge sessions. Yeah, and I heard that we also found one or the other bug, which is also, of course, good. So we can fix it. I think there was some small issue with the XE encoding for plug-and-charge, maybe one or two things more. But again, it was a fruitful event, and it showed again that it really makes sense to participate there. Right, Marco was at the network FutureCar in Frankfurt, and he had a short talk about the EVerest open source ecosystem. And I also mentioned the anniversary already. in Amsterdam. That was this week, Tuesday to Thursday, so today. And I think this I already mentioned this big news that OSPP 201 was approved to be an international standard right now. It's definitely great news. Right. Some news about the EV Charging SIG. The first face-to-face meeting was happening during the Linux Foundation Energy Summit in Brussels, where a small group met on site, and people are excited to get started. There's a second online call. Well, this is probably old news. It's Wednesday, 25 December. Not sure. That should be October. But I guess when we share the slide deck, we can update this. Yeah, and also here, if you are or working on a project related to EV charging, the EV Charging SIG could be something interesting for you. So in case you're interested in support from the LF Energy, you can also reach out and get in touch so we can talk about that. Right, some updates about the EVerest working groups. We start with a quite new one, the Grid Integration Energy Management Working Group. I think the first working group meetings have happened, and there's quite some stuff going on currently in EVerest to enhance the energy management that is already there. And there had also been a couple of improvements regarding OSPP smart charging. Some only for 1.6, but I think a few were also touching OSPP 201. So we had default limits for the composite schedule calculation in there. So in case no limit was yet transmitted by the central system, we need to fall back to some default, which was constant so far. So we made this configurable so that charging stations can configure their defaults in case the CSMS does not send any limits. And for 1.6, the consumer application could only, which is basically EVerest Core, could only request the composite schedule in amps. And this is also now configurable. So depending on your use case, you can either request watts or amps and integrate this in the energy management. And then there's a bigger refactor that we, I think, also mentioned the last time. We actually planned to put this into the upcoming release, but we decided to postpone it since it's quite a large change. How the energy management integration of OSPP and API and the API modules work. There is also a pull request in EVerest framework for this that allows you to configure a mapping for your EVSE or connector modules that this EVerest Core pull request uses. So there will be some changes required in your current configurations when this is merged. So we decided to postpone it and not put it into this release. Cloud Communication Working Group. I just came back, and Kai as well, from Almere, where we met with other members of the Cloud Communication Working Group to talk about some important architectural and design decisions for libOSPP, especially with closing out the OSPP 201 development, where I think only reservation and some ISO 15118 smart charging use cases are left. We are already looking at OSPP 2.1, so it was a good point in time to meet face to face and discuss some important things for how to move forward with this. The TLDR that you can see on the slide has already been shared in Zulab as well. Maybe I can just quickly summarize. So we thought about allowing the protocol version switching at runtime, but we decided that this is not really used by and not really useful to actually let the CSMS decide which version to use, and it leads to a lot of complexity with the current design that we're having. So we at least postponed it and said, we don't want to get started with it. You can switch between 2.1 and 2.01, but switching back to, or at least let the CSMS decide to switch back to 1.6 is nothing that we want to allow, because it leads to a lot of complexity in the implementation that we do not consider to be really relevant actually in the real world. Well, we talked a little bit about the bloated charge point class, where we want to move some functionality into separate classes. That's something that we will start to do. And we also talked about documentation. There are some pull requests from the AFS team that were opened up that are pretty useful and pretty helpful. And we talked a little bit about how we can structure that a little bit better, separate between 1.6 and 2.01, and also between user and developer documentation. Well, and then we also talked about how to move forward with 2.1, but I mentioned that already. Car communication working group. Maybe Moritz, do you want to go
Sure,
over
I can
that?
volunteer on this one. So, as you mentioned, the Testival in Versailles, France, the classic protocols still worked as expected, well tested already. Plug and Charge has got some more testing now. Most sessions actually worked, and two bugs were fixed during the Testival, which is really good news. And then the -20 dynamic mode got a lot more testing now. -20 testing is really picking up. Still some TLS problems and an XCD coder error there. In EVerest Core, the ISOMOX module has been merged. That's a module which sort of interfaces between the old EVSE V2G module, which covered the -2 and the DIN protocol, and the new module for the -20 communication. So while we still have two different ones, this one picks up the socket communication from the EV and decides which module to transfer it to proxy it to. I must mention it is merged, but it won't be part of the coming September release. It'll be in the subsequent release. A bug with the voltage limits was fixed. Again, another one with certificate hashes was also fixed. And then some new pull requests, which are not yet finalized or merged for the -20 dynamic mode finally. Sorry, dynamic mode. Some OpenSSL key logging support. Previously with the embed TLS crypto library, we had that in for the key logging. You need those keys in order to be able to decrypt traffic traces in Wireshark, for example. And so now we can log them from the new OpenSSL implementation as well and use that. And since now you will see almost all -20 communication will be TLS encrypted, you could sort of switch it off if you wanted to, but some partners wouldn't support that. And now we can always continue with TLS and be able to debug it after the fact. And then some other small fixes were made. On the CBXE which builds the XE codec, which is used in these high-level communication modules. The work has been picked up again. The first pull request has been merged. That's one for the large integers, which was required for one type, which is used for certificates. The X509 serial number needed this. And other pull requests with bugs and enhancements are being worked on. So hoping to get all that code a little bit cleaner in the near future.
Right. Thanks, Moritz. EVerest framework and tools. Kai, can you take over?
Yeah, sure. Basically two bigger new things. One of them is more or less a bit of a fix of the EV CLI, which wasn't taking template updates into account for rebuilds doing CMake builds, which should do that now with some of these pull requests. It's also soon getting installed during, or when you're using the virtual env for Python, it's getting installed automatically during configure, which wasn't the case before. And the second thing here is this 3-tier mapping for modules. There's already some documentation up, but the pull requests almost ready to get merged, and this allows you to write into the config which modules belong to a certain EVSE and connector, which can then be used, for example, in the smart charging and in error reporting to report, for example, to OCPP which parts of a charging station had a certain error. Additionally, there's still some work in progress for this config delivery via MQTT. I think we mentioned already in the last TSC, and some more explicit exception handling during command calls, which basically would allow EVerest to report things like, right now we have timeouts, which are very long, like 5-minute timeouts, that would get configurable with this, I think, and we can report some other errors as well, like when a module that was called had an exception, we could report this back to the caller, and other things like format issues as well.
Okay, thank you, Kai. Not sure if you want to continue with CI, CD, and testing. Otherwise, I can do it too.
Please continue.
Well, we have worked on the reusable workflows, integrate this in the different repositories in EVerest. We have been testing a coverage report for unit testing. It has been added to the liblog library to just check out how it works, and we are going to roll this out in the other repositories as well. And I think it definitely be helpful to increase the coverage of unit tests. Looking at libOSVP, I think we have some good examples for the smart charging, and with now the functionality that we will move out of the charge point, it will also be way easier to test the individual units. So we will probably also take that into the other EVerest libraries. Then the meeting cadence has changed. So the CI and CD testing working group now meets every first Thursday of the month at 4:30 p.m. to 5 p.m. Central European Time. The next meeting is on November the 7th. It's general discussion and QA working group. As far as I know, also not that much has been going on there. There will also be alternating time slots for the general working group call starting at the 29th of October, where we will also include one US-friendly time slot a week, and then switch back to Asian, Australia-friendly time slots. So this will be alternating. Yeah, and it's also reflected in the Linux Foundation Energy Calendar. Vulnerability Management Team, VMT. Right, FutureCar, no incidents to report, but the mailing list has been set up apparently. Anything to add, Kai?
No, nothing to add.
Okay. So the VMT is reachable via everest-security@list.energy.org. So if you have any questions about security or you want to report incidents, you can do it there. I think we are about to also update the security MD file, so that's also mentioned there. So those are the next steps for that. Right. Monthly release notes, EVerest release cycle recap. Maybe Kai, you can take over this one.
Yeah, so we're almost done with the September stable release because there was quite a lot of testing going on there and some bugs that needed to be fixed. But I think we're very close to being able to release that. But that also doesn't mean that time stopped and we haven't added a lot of features that didn't make it in that stable release, like we already mentioned in the past, the ISO-20 module in the ISOMOX, for example. So for the next release, this is typical source code release, and yeah, on the next slide, there's a bit of a list of things that made it in there, which this mentioned beta release of the ISO 15118-20, the multiplexer module for ISO, I think the error reporting or the better error reporting via OSPP 201, some AUF and energy management fixes, and this multiple route CA feature for the EVSE security part, which I think is quite interesting for OSPP and I think even the ISO, but I'm not so sure here.
Mm-hmm.
As well as the TLS key logging for the for the ISO module. And yeah, will be released in the coming days, probably next week or so.
Yep. Thank you. So what next? I think I mentioned this during the 6th slide already. Call for new DevKits Foundation Energy members. So you can have an overview about what LF Energy can do for you. So in case you are working on a project in that field, feel free to reach out or sign up using the link that's mentioned here. Yeah, this is an updated roadmap slide for OSPP 201. I already mentioned we're closing out for OSPP. I already mentioned we're closing out 2.0.1, and we will start this year with 2.1. There's actually a draft pull request already open that adds the 2.1 messages, which will be used also in the 201 communication since it's backwards compatible. Yeah, and we are working towards getting 2.0.1 done and stable, and then we will start to implement the bidirectional use cases, since we see that this is the most interesting part currently in the industry. Yeah, and continue from that with the 2.1 spec. Also for the -20, a couple of things could be moved from into the today section, especially the MUX module was added here, and also the dynamic mode for the -20. So we are also working on getting DC and DC-BPT enabled, as well as plug and charge for -20, and also AC and AC-BPT, including the integration with OSPP smart charging and also the EVSE manager. So since this touches the whole chain, there's a lot going on in all these different parts of EVerest right now. Yeah, that's a more high-level overview about the different topics that we're working on. E-bus is maybe something to mention that we have started to look at. There is, I think, part of so there's this Open Leader project, part of the Linux Foundation, and there's one other Rust project that works on an open e-bus implementation right now. So we hope that we can integrate this and make use of this in EVerest, which would be very useful. Yeah, and I guess that's all for this slide. Yeah, here's a list of upcoming events. With the next event, November 12 to 15 with the Electronica. And the CS coming up for STEM eWorld. Yeah, lots of interesting events in the next months. And the next TSC will be at November 28th. We moved the December TSC from the 26th to the 19th, so a little bit earlier in the month where probably a few more people are available. And of course, if you are interested, please join one of the working group calls that you can find in the Linux Foundation Energy calendar.